Hey there, happy Sunday. This is Scott from Limitless, and welcome to this week's podcast of High Performance Habitudes. Habitude, what is that, you ask? Hey, it's a combination of your attitudes giving your habits, getting you the results in your life. Want to find out how you can get to more of the things that you really want to do? Well, today we're talking about that age-old question about we never have enough time. Stick around, we'll show you how to get more of the things you want to do in just a moment. You know, we all come from different parts of the world, different walks of life. We're all over the place. But one of the things that we have in common is I have never heard anybody say, I've got too much time. Well, maybe if you're in prison, you've got too much time. But most people don't have enough time. We just never seem to have enough of it. The challenge is, well, we're always busy, but we're not usually busy with the right stuff. And you know that. So I want you to think about, for today's podcast, think about the time you have like a wallet. And in that wallet, you've got $1,000 bill. And if you waste time doing things that aren't investing, okay, for your future, you're more just spending your time, you're throwing away that $1,000 bill. So you open up the wallet and you just hang out and you watch a movie that you didn't really like anyways, it's just filling time. Throw away that $1,000. You're participating in a conversation for 2 or 3 hours that, gosh, you wish you were anywhere else, but throw away that $1,000 because that's in fact what happens when you don't make good use of time. So today's real title of our podcast is going to be Investing or Spending Your Time. What do you do with most of your time? I think we can all acknowledge that we need to have time to plan things that really matter to us. And, you know, if you're one of those folks who sort of grown into yourself, you realize that you are responsible for your successes and failures in life, that you can't blame other people. Hey, if you're not getting to the things that you really want to, you have no one else to blame but who? Yeah, moi, yourself. It is all about us and how we choose to spend our time. And you know, you say, well, sometimes, Scott, I've got things that compete. You know, I've got family to take care of, friends, and all these things. And yes, and I'm not advocating for one moment that you abdicate your responsibilities there. But is it not true that when we are growing and we're feeling really good about ourselves, that we're even better friends, we're better partners, we're better parents, all those kinds of things? And so it really comes full circle when you have time that you actually invest that helps you grow. Everybody benefits about that. I remember, I used to run this wildlife sanctuary, and if you haven't heard the story or listened to the first podcast, I ran Canada's largest endangered animal sanctuary. And we had lions and tigers, snakes and owls and all kinds of creatures. Now, to raise funds for this sanctuary, I would do endangered species presentations at a variety of youth programs across southern Ontario. And I had to get pretty good at time. I remember my first summer, I could manage doing 4 shows a week. 4 shows a week. I think I was getting about $300 a show. Yeah, that's $1,200. Even in $1989, that's not a lot of money. But I quickly realized that if I started using my time more effectively and plan things out, by the second summer, I was up to 16 resorts. And the business sense had kicked in and I had increased the rate. So we were doing, close to, $10,000, $15,000 a week. Why could I do that? It's because I looked at where the time was being used. I learned how to make efficient use of the time so that I could generate the money for the animals, which also meant that more animals could be cared for at the other end. And I've kept that mantra of I'm always aware of what time is going by. I'm aware of how I'm investing my time. I mean, if you looked at my calendar in my computer, you would see that I have things slotted off. And if I have a meeting with you from 9 until 9:15, it is 9 to 9:15. It's not starting at 9:05 and it's not going to 9:20. I am very militant, if you can accept that word, about how I spend time because it is the one finite resource that I have. I cannot create more time, so I've got to be very judicious, proactive. I want it to be invested as much as possible. And, later on after the Speaking of Wildlife piece, I remember, I moved out to Vancouver in 1999, and I was able within 2 years to get 2 tenured positions at post-secondary institutions here. And nobody had ever done that before. What that meant was I had a full-time position at one institution and a full-time teaching position at another institution. And I was able to do this. And I remember about 2 years after I had done this, the union started saying, hey, how are you able to work at this institution and that institution? It's because I prioritize my time. And that was really important for me because at that point, I had a young family, lots of monetary obligations and those types of things. So if you use your time effectively, it's amazing the doors that will open up. While doing the teaching at one of the institutions, I became the director of entrepreneurship. And so basically, for the last 15 years, I have been helping hundreds of businesses start and grow. And I can tell you this after watching, I think it's over 2,000 businesses attempt to launch and grow. People are, smile on my face, pathetic planners. They stuff their days, but they underestimate how long it's going to take to get any one job done. They'll put aside an hour for a task that's going to take 3 hours. I mean, can you think of your own life where, you go, I've put half an hour aside for this and something technologically doesn't work, somebody doesn't show up on time. All these kinds of variables kick in. And then by the end of the day, if you are one of those great people who actually said, I want to get these 4 things done today, if you've got 2, maybe 3 of them done, that's as good as it gets. And it can create frustration in you because you always feel like you're behind the 8 ball. So I'm here to take a little bit of that heat off, okay? When you go about planning your days, okay, put in the 1 or 2 things that you think you can get done and still have some time left at the day. Because things generally take longer than most people think. Can you think about something like that? Even doing a podcast like this, I mean, it'll run for 15 or 20 minutes, but it's about a 3-hour process from the time of writing down some of the notes that I'd like to share with you to the time of mixing down the recording, putting on the artwork, posting, all that kind of stuff. It's not just a 20-minute task. So we really need to get good at thinking about right from point A to point Z, how long is it going to take? And then when we think about what we're actually planning for, what we usually do is put in busy stuff during the day. I've got to do something with the house. I've got to, run the kids around. I've got to meet this person for coffee, that person for coffee, whatever it is. And not all these activities are investable. In other words, they don't take you towards something growth-oriented or fulfilling that has long-term value, that feeds that long-term vision of yourself writing a book on a beach or sailing around the world or traveling wine country in Italy as you write for a magazine back in Canada. They're more just, Q1 according to Stephen Covey's time management matrix, if you've ever had a chance to equate yourself with that. It's busy stuff. It doesn't have long-term purpose. Yes, it's needed, but it will always be there. And when you do that part of it, there'll be more of it to come in. And so unless you actually make a wedge to put time in for investable activities, things like, long-term steps for your career or your family. And I'm not talking about making lunches. I'm talking about education for your family, maybe a family trip going down the line. And how about your health? In terms of, it's in the new year now. You have health goals for yourself. It's not just going to happen that all of a sudden you lose 15 pounds, develop muscle, and can run your first 10K. It takes some planning or even for adventure. So every week, what I want you to be able to do is carve that same period of time, and weekends are usually pretty good because that's when we get to decompress if you have a normal work schedule. So I get it, your weekend could be Tuesday, Wednesday. But take that time, and take an hour, at least a week, to think about that long-term stuff. I mean, behind me, I have a whiteboard that is 7 feet tall, 10 feet wide, that every week I've got my goals for the year outlined on that. And I check off to see how I'm progressing in there. It's a visual reminder of the things that are important for me, my investable items for my time. So we get on track and you start putting investable stuff into your life in terms of your activities, but there's still this thing of there's thousands upon thousands of requests for your attention and time throughout the day, and that could be friends and families. And so let's start out point 2, number 2 here, saying don't let someone else's false emergency hijack your time or your day. Let me say that again because it's so important. Don't let someone else's false emergency hijack your day. How many times have you gotten into work and gotten into home and it's, Jerry, or it's something along the lines of, mom, dad, and all of a sudden the drama hits. Somebody else's false, societal, hyperactive drama comes in and takes you off what otherwise was going to be investing time for yourself. Why should you have to pay the price for someone else's poor planning skills? Now, I'm not talking, I get it with young kids. I mean, it's always immediacy and right now, but for friends and family and coworkers kinds of stuff, I love, if you want a sort of retort to this kind of thing. I love what the Dalai Lama said, and I'm paraphrasing here, so this is not a quote, that someone was giving him something that was all full of angst, and he says, thank you, but I cannot accept this gift of urgency from you at the moment. And it was his polite way of saying, hey, you know what? This is your emergency. It's not mine. I'm not going to take ownership of that. And really, that's what we're trying to say here, is that you're going to have all kinds of things come at you, and you do, probably even as we speak. Probably something else is competing for your time as you're listening to this podcast. Put it off to the side. This is someone else's agenda for you. You do not have to accept it as your agenda. What you need to do is choose your response to these types of things. And it's incredibly calming. It's incredibly empowering when all of a sudden you've said no to things that were previously yes, that caused you all kinds of angst. So even if your partner gets up and, they got up on the wrong side of the bed, and I got to do this, and this. By the way, that's never happened to me. I'm nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But you don't have to accept that as the start to the day. Say, just give themselves some space and think about settling yourself down. And what you get to do is provide calm to them on the other end. Don't add fuel to a fire that's not worth burning. How's that one? Just came up with that. Don't add fuel to a fire that's not worth burning. And the way you decide if it's not worth burning is, will this issue matter a week from now? And if the answer is no, why would I spend my limited amount of time and focus and energy on something that has no long-term value? And the third point that we want to talk about is, you know how some people, and I do too, lose yourself in time. You get so ensconced, engrossed, and enraptured in an activity that you just lose track of time. And that's okay, because that really sets your mind free. The hard part is it also robs you of other important things. So if you're one of those people that has an internal clock in your mind, and I unfortunately do, it's just part of who I am. I can tell you within 5 minutes without a watch what time of day it is at any point in time, which is kind of scary. But if you don't want to do that, you don't want to have that regimentation, then you need to have something prompt you, so that if you're going to have an hour's coffee chat with somebody at Starbucks, because then you're going to come back and work on your book, then you've got to set an alarm. And so that it goes off after that hour is up, and you move on to those kinds of things. Because what happens is the ripple effect, doesn't it? That first activity that was supposed to finish at 10 in the morning doesn't finish till 10:15. So your 10 o'clock one has to rebook to 11, and 11 gets put off. And by the end of the day, you're up to 3 out of 5 activities that you got done that you were supposed to. And now it has a ripple effect the next day because you've got some carryover. That is poor planning. Okay, that is what we want to eliminate, because we're just talking about things that we wanted to get done. In terms of what we need for necessities of life. We're not even talking about freeing up things that you need to do. So that goes back to point number 2, is when somebody asks you to do something, feel free to really think about it and say no to more things. Say no to activities that aren't going to be long-term value. If you have a friend who wants to come over and spend an afternoon with you, but it's really only worth an hour of your time, put that boundary around it so that you have that hour. And quite honestly, I do that all the time. And my friends who are high-performing friends who are actually doing the things they want to do, they do that as well. They are very guarded about how they spend their time, and I respect them for that. If you've got appointments, make it a life habitude about being on time, or even just a little bit earlier. There are a few things that are ruder, particularly as you move up to people who are in more power positions, than making someone wait. Making someone wait, basically saying that my time is more important than your time. Not a really good emotional kind of quotient thing to set off with somebody. It's not a value statement that you want to make. So make sure that you're on time. Finish early if you can. You do not have to stay for a full hour meeting if you've blocked that off. Stop it at half an hour and give yourself some extra time. Because what people don't anticipate is if they have appointments that are bookend, from 10 to 11 and 11 to 12, there's a transition time. If you come out of a meeting and you've been really heavy into a lot of heavy mental lifting in that, and it's taking you that full hour, and you've got another one, in 2 minutes, there's transition time. There's bio breaks. Your brain needs to relax and decompress and reset so that you can actually go to that next activity. So where a lot of hidden time comes from is those transition breaks between appointments. So when I actually go onto my calendar and book things, I don't bookend them. If I think something's going to take half an hour to 45 minutes, and I'm pretty good at guesstimating, I'll give it that full hour. Okay, so even if I go a little bit longer, I've got some time, and I don't book it at 10 o'clock, my next appointment. I book it at 10:15. So if it goes for 45 minutes, I now have from 9:45 all the way to 10:15 to break and reset and maybe even do a little bit of planning. I get quality work done that way, as opposed to having it finish right at 10. Oh, gotta go, because you really don't have a chance to prepare for meetings. And by the way, this is in another habit too, which is about preparing for negotiations, is preparation is the key to any meeting. What's going to happen in that meeting is largely set before you ever enter that meeting. And so you need to give yourself preparation time to do that. Sorry, that was a little sidebar thing on my. And point number 4 today, just this tiny little thing called technology. Did you know that the average person with a smartphone looks at the smartphone, how many times a day do you think? 10, 20, 50? Study came out last week, 150 times on average per day. And most people, when asked about how many times they look at it, would say 50 or 60, that we underestimate by a factor of 3 the number of times that we look at our smartphone. Want to take a look at where most of wasted time actually goes? Take a look at technology. You may be wrestling with that with your kids in your house. If you run a company or department, with your employees looking at smartphones. It's amazing because folks like Facebook and Google have used dopamine algorithms in the way they actually structure their software so that it uses similar neural pathways as heroin to create that addictive response. Isn't that absolutely crazy? You are being pellet fed, much like some of the rats in B.F. Skinner's experiments way back in the early 20th century of getting rewards for looking at your cell phone. The push technologies, the cookie technologies, the notification technologies, all designed to make you an addict. And in the confines of what we're talking about today, what a waste of time. Just think about the sheer amount of time it takes to look at a phone 150 times a day, to go to your Facebook account, your LinkedIn account, your emails, all that kind of stuff. But now it's this reset time that once you've looked at that, it takes 3 to 4 minutes to reset after you've had that provocative email or that post or those kinds of things. And by the way, the posts, if Facebook doesn't think you are using it enough, it won't even show you all the likes for your post right away. It'll make you come back again. So the idea is to get you having this constant feed on that. And just one more of the recent evolutions in addictive dopamine release that media are using on you. If you've taken a look at some of the websites like CBC, etc., and they'll start playing a video after you've watched a commercial already. And just when it comes to the key point, the hook of the video, that is when they'll place the next ad. So you have to watch that ad to find out if the baby's saved, if the whale breaches, all those kinds of things. So technology is really using us as lab rats these days. And a lot of people who are former executives for some of the tech companies down in Silicon Valley are saying, yeah, we knew we were doing something bad when we did it. I was kind of sorry we did it right now. So there's a real move to try to get folks to break away from this addiction, because not only does it waste a ton of time, but what it's supposed to do, which is connect the world, it creates drone-like humans that are receiving their information from even fewer and fewer resources that are controlled by the major powers. And that doesn't sound like real great connectivity for me, but I digress. So you've made it through this podcast on how to invest versus spend your time. So here's that quick summary for you. Number 1, identify investable ways to spend your time. Think of career, think of family, think of health, think of adventure, and think of long term. Number 2, plan time to ensure you engage in these activities. It's great to think about it as you're driving, but unless it hits your planner, your digital planner, your paper planner, whatever you use, it's not going to happen. And I would suggest taking that same time every day of the week, that every hour, that same hour, that becomes your time. Number 3, and I love this one because it happens to everybody I know, don't let someone else's false emergencies hijack your day. That's their agenda. That's their stuff. They've got to take ownership for it. Number 4, have ways to always be aware of the time that's going by for you so that you can go deep immersed into a great conversation with a friend. But if you've got other things to get to, don't create that ripple effect and backing up. And number 5, go offline for at least an hour once per day. Whether that's at the gym or on a walk while you're reading, certainly at a table, there should be no cell phones. And if you are the parents or if you're the CEO, get rid of those cell phones. You got to have that information come from top down. So there's the 5 takeaways for today. Just remember, it's easier to spend time these days than it ever has been. And it requires more discipline to invest in meaningful activities and relationships. Hold on to your long-term vision firmly and keep it in your eyesight. And every time there's a request for your time, make sure it's of the grade, of the quality for you to engage in, okay? Next time, we're going to talk about the power of your posse. Have a great week. We'll chat to you next time. Cheers. This is Scott from Habitudes.